Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to a much more interesting part of this integrity session. So I'm going to introduce Story Sayers. She is the digital and content manager for the International Ice Hockey Federation and has been working in digital content and strategy and production for over a decade. Her passion for hockey extends beyond the ice, and her mission to showcase the diversity of voices in the sport through unique storytelling across digital channels. Story produced and worked with our videographers to produce all of the videos that we have today, and she will be the moderator for the last panel session.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, but I am very excited to be joined by our panelists today. So I like to try to give them a bit of a kind of epic intro as much as possible. So, two-time Olympic gold medalist with Team Canada, current head coach of the back-to-back bronze medal winning Czech women's national team, and the only female head coach at the 2023 Women's World Championship. Please welcome Carla MacLeod. He has 6 World Championship appearances with Team Denmark and is the current head coach of Dudegen in MyHL. Please welcome Kirill Starkov. He won a 2010 World Junior silver medal with Team Canada and is a 2018 Olympic bronze medalist. Please welcome Brandon Kozun. So I like to start these panels with a word. I think it's a great way to break the ice a little bit and get our brains talking about and get our brains thinking about what we've just seen in this presentation. So our word is integrity. What does integrity mean to you? And in the world of sports specifically. So Brandon, let's start with you and we'll go down the line.
I think, is this working? There we go. I think for me it's the word that I like to use is respect. It's really important that respect comes from many layers, and it's not just about the player respecting the coach or the coach respecting the player, or management respecting everybody. I think that there needs to be a mutual respect on all levels, and it seems to me that through the experiences that I've had, that when that mutual respect does exist, then you're dealing with a lot less of these kinds of problems.
I would say values. Like we're all coaches here, former players, we work with hockey and we love the game. When we go back home, we have to be the storytellers for the youth about values, about integrity, because we all love the game and we have to protect the game. Coming from me who made a bet on my game, values can get blurred. And I'm in this panel today to say there's chain reaction that happened through my career that put me in a position where mentally I made a very bad decision. And it's connected to abuse, it's connected to Brandon's case, and we will get to that later, but it's important we uphold the values and share the story.
Carla?
Yeah, I think for me, integrity is all we are. It's our reputation. It's what we do. I think integrity is easy when times are good. So I think true integrity is when we're struggling, when we're facing our highest pressure situations, when we're struggling the most. Who are we and what are the decisions that we make? And when you think of sport, there's a lot of those high pressure moments for various reasons. So, what do we default to? What guides us? And to me, at the end of the day, integrity is really all we've got. It doesn't mean we're not going to misstep along the way, and you got to work through that. But trying to stay on that path and stay on that track is the challenge, and particularly on the tough days.
I think we hear that a lot about it's really easy when you're up. It's even harder when you're down. So thinking of each of your experiences as they relate to integrity topics, anti-doping, competition manipulation, abuse and harassment. What is one word that you would use to describe that experience? And maybe we can circle back this way and put Carla on the spot first.
That's a good question. It's hard to come up with one word. Like, it's a tough experience. This is a tough topic, and I think for all of us in the room as coaches, the landscape is changing rapidly right now from our position. And so, understanding what this means and the impact. I think there was a time, probably even 3-4 years ago, where we'd all do our Respect in Sport and like seminars and series, and you kind of just go through the motions. Make sure you check the box at the end so you're in a good spot. And I think the way that the landscape's moving for us in sport, and a lot of this movement is a great thing, and it's much needed, but it's created some uncertainty. And I think when you look at all these pillars, being educated well in them and understanding our role and our responsibility is critical. So I'm not sure that answers your question, Story, but that's when I put this all together from our perspective as coaches, we really do need to know what we're responsible for so we can make sure, one, we are imparting that on our players and helping them be successful, but also protecting ourselves and understanding what our rights are.
My word will be joy, and it's a bit of a strange word, but when I was growing up, and it's connected a bit to the presentation about Minnesota system, like youth system from yesterday, I had joy playing hockey. Man, I loved it. I just went to the rink, had a joyful game or a practice, then I went and played football. Next day, I had another joyful experience. Once my career progressed and one statistic came into play, the joy went away, and it turned into happiness. You say, happiness is a good word, but joy is a constant. You don't need reward to be joyful. Happiness, you need to get rewarded. So all of a sudden, you're just a number. You're looking for somebody to tell you you're a good player. You're looking to score a goal to feel happy. You want to have a good training to feel happy. You see you're not in the lineup, you get sad. You're gonna chase the happiness again. Then you need to score 2 goals, and it's just a spiral that just never ending. And I told a story that I played professionally for many years. I signed a contract with Columbus. I was the 0. whatever percent who actually get to experience that. Not one coach told me I was a good player. After I was 16, no coach sat me down and told me I was a good player. It was always conditional. You're good in attack, but you suck in defense. You're good at this, but nobody saw me as a person or a good player. So I kept chasing this kind of, how do you say it, the word efficiency, or is that the correct word?
Dream or happiness.
One coach, I played with Sweden. It was a tough coach, he has a reputation of being tough. But he was the only coach in my hockey career who sat me down and spent 15 minutes talking to me as a person, as an athlete, saying he saw my development as a person. That transition in me being a more mature and a better player, and that I was an important part of his team and the group, and I'm the reason and part of the success we're having with Team Denmark. It was Per Beckman, reputation of being a tough coach, but he was the only coach in my career who spent those 15 minutes with me. And thinking back now, when I don't play anymore, and the most joyful time I had as a hockey player was those 15 minutes, because it reminds me that I actually was good at what I did. And when I need confidence, I think back of those 15 minutes. And I played for several coaches in KHL, in US. One coach took the time.
Yeah, I think for me personally, the word that I would use is eye-opening. Your entire career, you're kind of taught to be a certain way, and I think in hockey itself, we have a little bit of an old school mentality when it comes to a lot of things, and it's getting a little bit more progressive as we go, but I think even though you think that you're educated, you're never educated enough. And for myself personally, when it comes to anti-doping, it was never an area where I would ever have thought that I would get in trouble for. I was always the straight and narrow kid. I was always, 30 minutes early. I was never late. I was so dedicated to my craft, and I wanted to be great so badly that I was just on that straight line. And I think what all of this has taught me is that it can happen to anybody. And no matter how educated you think that you are on something, that you could always be more educated.
So hearing your stories and hearing about, Kirill, you only had one coach who told you you were good. I think we have, what I hear a lot is, players put the blinders on. So how do those experiences, the connections with your coach, how have they impacted who you are as a person, player, coach today?
I promised myself I would never do it to my players. Like what Brandon said now, he was dedicated to the game. I was dedicated as well. And what happened to me is a chain reaction from things from my career to led me to a situation in Denmark where my values got blurred. And this is why I say it's so important that we as a group carry the storytelling and the values. We can't expect one person. We need to be a team about this. So I'm just going to share a quick story. Because you say, it's so easy to, of course, it's only right. Values, it's simple. We're all good people. But it can become a bit blurred. So I was in a team that asked me, or they didn't ask, they were supposed to handle my visa issue. But I had to travel back. I was 20. I just came in December, and I was 20, and I had to go to the Olympic qualification with Denmark. And my visa was expiring, and the team was trying to make a new visa for me. So a couple of days before I have to leave, instead of a visa, I get a passport. A fake passport. Or, I don't know. They use my signature for my contract and a picture from the website to make me a passport. And they told me, go to Denmark, use your Danish passport to fly out of the country, and come back with your Russian, the one we'd just given you. And to give a little bit of backstory, when I was 18, I have to give up my Russian passport because in Denmark, you're not allowed to have double citizenship. So I picked Denmark and said no to Russia, because that was the rules of the Danish Ice Hockey Federation, and that was the rules of the Danish government. So I was 20, and I was put in the position, if you travel across the border, use your real passport. If you travel back, just use your fake. I said, well, I cannot do that, just give me a visa. If you don't like it, just don't come back. I was like, fuck, I'm 20. And how I know the passport was not real, because at that point I was an import player. That passport didn't make me a local player. I asked, they said, no, you're still going to be an import player. So there was some gray, coming back from the national team, I was shaking going to the airport and handing them a fake Russian passport to this military-looking guy at the Moscow airport. And I was 20. I just came back from a bad experience in the AHL where I was backskated for a whole season, and now I'm there, just holding a passport in my hand. And the consequences, I don't know, will they send me to the military? What if, does this guy checking my passport, does he know? What if he finds out? Are the team gonna have my back? I just been there for 1 month. So at some point we talk about values. First of all, I didn't have anybody at the team because everybody was scared. At that point I couldn't contact anybody who I thought would have my back and share the same values. So at that stage I knew the team was doing something wrong to me, and this is not how you should treat a player. But I was in a position I could just not, I couldn't say no. I broke the rules by traveling on some kind of made-up passport. And I did it. I was a good person, but I broke, my values was questioned. Should I have stood up, put my foot down and said, I don't agree with you? Looking now, yes, I would have done that. Back then, I just couldn't do that. I was not in a position to do that. And this is this abuse of power, which is, it's bad.
Carla, as someone who has 20-year-old players and younger on your team, what are you thinking when you hear a story like that? Is that something that you've heard a few times before, maybe?
Well, that story's unique and a tough one to hear, for sure. I think it's a reminder as coaches, it's a terrible word, but how powerful we really are in the journey of our athletes, regardless of what level they are. For the most part, we're all coaching athletes who are trying to get to probably the next level. And I'm reminded on a national team, you only have one option. So athletes that are pursuing a national team, they can't be traded to another country. They can't just up and leave and live that same goal and that same experience. So it's maybe even a heightened position of power. And so for me, that story is reminding me of being highly, highly respectful, making sure that everything is above board. These players that we get to work with, the privilege of being a coach is working with the people that we get to work with. Not the game. The game's a blessing, and we all love it. That's why we're here. But the privilege is the people. And we have to always remember that, and no result will ever trump that. And, I think when you're trying to maximize your group and you're trying to maximize the experience for your players, you want the best version of them. And I don't know what's happened in sport that all of a sudden we think the best version of anyone's going to be at a negative environment or a yelling and screaming or a constantly critical environment. I don't know you guys, but I'm not going to rise in that moment. I'm going to crumble. So trying to foster that environment that we empower our athletes to be the most confident version of themselves is really the objective that I know I've had great coaches that have impacted me that way, and it benefited me as a player. And it's certainly something now that I try to bring to my teams, because at the end of the day, there's no medal, there's no paycheck that would ever make a situation like that, in my opinion, an okay situation. And I had a great mentor at home, Wally Kozak, who said to me when I was quite young, if you're nothing with a medal, you'll be nothing, or if you're nothing without a medal, you'll be nothing with a medal. And we chase this sort of vision of what we think that result will bring us. And I can say from my experience, no result would ever be worth my integrity.
Brandon, when you hear Kirill recount his story, how much of that connection and those intersections do you feel and do you hear with your story?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it comes back to certain individuals taking advantage of power within their situation. And something that we need to understand is, as I mentioned before, as we educate ourselves to grow the game and get it to a better place, we would like to hope that some of the people who are in these powerful positions are educated or want to be educated on what impact they can actually make on people's lives. Most of the time, a lot of us are seen as numbers, and it's difficult. I've played in Russia in the KHL for the last 8 years, and I've seen it firsthand of truly what being a number is. And I think mentally that can get a little bit difficult at times. And I hope that, through the experiences that I've had throughout my career, I can give back to anybody who has been in a similar situation or is going to be in a similar situation, to try and help them guide their way through it, because it's a lonely world at times, and having another voice that you can talk to is extremely important.
When we hear your story, and I think a big part of your story is everything that happened after the incident. So how have all of those experiences impacted you as a person off the ice, having to go through the sanctions and the hearings and everything, and that worry? Who are you now versus who were you then?
Well, I think the main thing for me is throughout all of this, of me coming forward and actually sharing some of the details that happened to me, the main thing that was very important for me was I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. I didn't want attention. That's not what I was looking for. It was never about that. The main focus for me was about trying to make a difference. And I'm not going to sit here and say that my situation was the worst. I know that a lot of people have had much worse things happen to them, and I feel blessed in a way that it worked out in a way. But again, at the end of the day, the most important thing for me is it has changed me as a person. It's changed me a lot. I'm not going to sit here and act like it didn't have an impact on me, but if I can use the resources that I had available to me and the experience that I've gone through and try and help anybody, whether it's a management figure, a player, or a kid, or a parent, or a coach, if I can help that situation not happen again, that would be the ideal situation for me, and it would make it at least soften the blow a little bit, for sure.
Yeah, I have the same as Brandon. I was sharing this not so people can say, oh, it was a bad experience here and there. We have this integrity group to tell coaches and players, you're not alone. Stuff are going on around the teams, and there are people who care and who've been through things, and you have somebody to come to, and you're not alone in this. And as a person, I've been wandering in the Swiss mountains for 5 years. Gives you really time to reflect. And when I was a player, I was stuck in this, in this environment, in this box. It was just, didn't see anything around me. And what happened to me with talking with all these amazing people is that now I snapped out of it. I can see the bigger picture. I love working with skills. I love working with development. But before I was just player. But now it's person, athlete, player, how it should be. And there's the staff from Lugano right here, and had the pleasure with working with one of their players. He came to one of my camps, and before what happened to me, I don't think I would have remembered him. I would have focused on skill, and that's it. I only spent, 1.5 days with him. He's an amazing person. If there's a barbecue on, he will be the first guy flipping the burgers. He had won the championship at Basel, but the Basel didn't keep him. They didn't take him up to the Swiss League. It's tough. He got an injury last season. Now he's going into coaching, and he looks 10 years younger when he shaved his beard and cut his hair. I didn't recognize him yesterday. He came to me, I don't even recognize you. I called him Salt Bay because he was barbecuing and sprinkling salt on the meat. I know that now, and I spent 1 day with him, 1.5 days. I know this now because what I went through made me care for the person as well. So this is a huge thing that I took with me. I'm still a tough coach. I still demanding coach. That haven't changed, but now I also see the person behind the player, and it made me grow as an individual.
Felt like I was like.
No, I was scratching my nose. Sorry.
Carla, I think with you, we've talked about it a lot about putting the person first before the athlete. So when you, especially when you walk into a brand new room, brand new team, a whole different country, how do you put that person first without getting overburdened by the athlete and the results that you want to see, especially in that first year?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge for all of us, even when you're with a team and it's sort of the next season. But one of the biggest pieces for me when I was given the opportunity to work with the Czech women's national team was to not come in and show them what I know. It was to go into that room and learn who they were. And that was a big sort of approach that I thought was really important. I actually don't think it connected with them the way that I thought it would. I think they resisted that approach a little bit. They thought maybe I didn't have a plan for them, I wasn't prepared, or I didn't know my hockey. But the last thing I wanted to do was to go in that room and just start imparting everything I thought would be important to be successful. Because, you know, the analogy I like to give is I think a lot of people can go into the kitchen with a good, strong recipe and make a really great meal. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a good tactic in the kitchen. But there's also chefs in the world that can open up the fridge door and see what ingredients they have and build something. And I think that's my approach to coaching, is I want to see who's in the room, what our style of play is on the ice naturally, and then bolster that. So I tried to take a bit of a slower approach to it, even though the timeline was quite short. But with that came the opportunity to get to know them a little bit more as women. And, you know, the little bit of homework I did heading in there, like, I was in Maui the start of July, and I was meeting the team at the end of July, and I sat on the beach in Maui with cue cards that I'd built at home with their picture on one side and then their name and some details I'd learned about them through our one-on-one conversations on the other side. And I was just trying to memorize, so when I got to camp, I could call them by name. And, you know, those are little things when you talk about trying to get to know the person. One of the little tactics our staff had too, and we ate meals that whole camp, and actually through the first World Championship, we didn't have the player tables and a staff table. We actually mixed and mingled with everyone. And the reason we did that is, where do you have your best conversations in life? It's usually at the dinner table, because you don't talk hockey. And so those were little things that we initiated when I started with that team to get to know the person. And that then allowed us to drive the hockey a little bit from a different angle and ask for maybe a little bit more. So, you know, having standards as a coach isn't abuse or isn't negative. That's a really important part of our job, and making sure our players can rise to those moments. But when you're asking them to go hard for you, you got to have a backfill of who they are as people. And you know, I think in a lot of ways I was really fortunate, because the Czech women were ultimately quite receptive to our staff and the tactics we were trying. But there was a conscious effort there to try to learn who they were.
I think that's a great kind of point in terms of creating belonging. And that's how we can sum that up, is you created belonging on your team, where belonging meant that you actually had a space and a place to be yourself. Kirill, you talk about belonging a lot, and how that was essentially the driver to what you were chasing when you entered into competition manipulation.
Yeah, growing up from, I mean, we talked about the Minnesota, again, back to the Minnesota system. When you grow up in your local community, you belong there. You know everybody. Your school teacher. You know, it's an environment where you belong. Then you slowly start to make you step out of your safety net. And yes, I want to be an NHL player. That's what I thought. But thinking back, I also wanted to belong. I wanted to find a new place where I could belong, where the belonging was not conditional. You can belong here if you score 3 goals. You can belong here only if you work hard. No, I was looking for something unconditional, as I was used to when I was a kid. And if the author of the book, now I don't remember his first name, I think it is Eastwood. He wrote a book on belonging, how he brought together the All Blacks in South Africa, telling the story, bringing all these different nations. Like, the history in South Africa is very complicated, but they all play for the same team. And he managed to create this belonging, and the English football team had the same issue. There were a lot of individuals, and now in football they kind of came together as one. And you can see the difference and the importance. And I was looking for that, and I couldn't find it. Like, everywhere I went, there was conditions. Get a passport, otherwise you can, stay in Denmark. It was tough. Like, really, really tough. And I see the importance of it now. I didn't back then. And this is when I was talking in my video about what led to it. The mental state was not there. I was not in a place where I should be. I was angry. I didn't know where to turn. So I made a bad decision. But now I'm realizing what actually I was seeking was a sense of belonging. And it's something that I've really emphasized now when I coach, and really make sure the team comes together, because it sounds, again, so simple. We all understand that's important to have a successful team. But sometimes we focus so much on the tactics that we forget that part of it. And with Minnesota hockey, it is amazing that they get to stay in the local community. Well, in other countries like Switzerland, players at age 15, they play in different clubs, jump around, like they get taken away from the safety into an environment that is unknown. And I see a lot of struggle with the kids in Switzerland not knowing where they're going to be or where they are.
Brandon, from your perspective as a teammate, and understanding it's probably a little difficult in the KHL to create belonging, but as a teammate, what can you do to create a sense of belonging within your team?
Well, that's a tough question. You know, the KHL is a whole different animal when it comes to a lot of these things. You know, it can feel a bit uncivilized at times, and maybe, you know, I've used the word progressive a little bit in what we've talked about. They probably haven't progressed a whole lot, but I guess one thing that I've kind of learned is, as I've gotten older and experienced more things throughout my career, is that just to be a support system. You don't necessarily have to tell somebody what to do or what you think is correct and incorrect, but just to have, you know, somebody to listen to and to be able to bounce something off of. And you know, for me, as a guy who's been around now a little while, maybe if there's a younger player that doesn't feel as comfortable, just opening myself up to them and giving them the opportunity to share whatever is on their mind, whether it be right or wrong.
And I think that extends to coaches as well, like we heard from Kyle's video about creating that true open door policy. One of the things that we've sort of had conversations about a lot this weekend is outside of the ice. So there's abuse and harassment. We hear about it internally. It's tackled. It's taken seriously. But off the ice or outside of the rink, when you hear from parents, you hear from fans on social media. I mean, how do you, as a coach, tackle abuse and harassment beyond outside of your team? Carla.
Yeah, it's a growing entity in itself. I'm terrible on social media, so go at me on it. I wouldn't most likely see it. So that part's a win that way. But you look at, you know, even managing your players when they're not with us. And what are they doing with one another, that peer-to-peer connection and relationship. Like, that's a big part of our world now as well, is trying to make sure that everyone understands where the boundaries are and what's acceptable and what's not. You know, I think parents are obviously highly invested in their kids. We all know that. We all see it, and that's a great thing in a lot of ways, but obviously there's a line there as well. And, you know, I think I'm by no means an expert at this. I'm learning every day, just like you guys are, but, you know, I think a lot of it boils down to communication and how clear is your communication, and you know, can you establish that early and hold it. What you say and what you do, if they align, typically you'll end up in a bit of a better spot. But it's a bit of the wild, wild west out there right now. So if anyone does figure it out, write that book, please. You'll be a bazillionaire, and I'd be the first to read it.
Yeah, this is a good question, and I think in my opinion, we should educate the parents. Sometimes we maybe also expect the parents. So if you put a kid in a competitive environment at an early age, as a parent, you have no clue what's going on the ice. Like doesn't have a background in hockey. So are you asking your kids the correct questions? Or are you asking the wrong questions because you don't know better? If you're sitting in a car with your son or daughter, did you win? Did you score? That's maybe your limit as a parent. You just don't know what to ask. So when I was coaching a bit the younger kids, I gave parents questions. Like, I told the parents, this week we're going to work on skating, and explained a little bit what we were doing and gave them a couple of suggestions to questions they could ask. You know, we're doing edge control today, inside, outside. Like, just give them I was alone. I didn't have any staff with me. I couldn't, I had to do it this way. There's probably other ways of doing it, but I gave the parents some tools to ask the correct questions related to actually what's going on the ice, and not where, we sometimes talk about parents in a very bad way. But come on, we have so many parents, we have so many kids. All parents cannot be educated in hockey. They just don't know what they're doing. So maybe we should focus a little bit, sometime replace it with the coaches here and put the parents in this room as well.
Brandon, what about you as a player? Listening to, I'm sure you get enough social media comments towards you, or even just walking down the street. How do you deal with that abuse and harassment from a player perspective?
Yeah, I think in the world that we live in today, I think it's very obvious what we all deal with. Everything is right in front of you with social media being the way it is, and it can be a very difficult environment for a lot of people. Before social media, the bullying kind of ended with interaction, and now bullying can go on all day. That's a difficult thing for a lot of people to deal with. From a player's perspective, I think that a lot of the time the player is always fighting for the respect, trying to earn the respect. And I'm just trying to kind of compare this to a coach's perspective. Is we're taught in our careers that we need to earn the coach's respect. And I think in hockey, what needs to happen a little bit is maybe the coach needs to earn the player's respect a little bit more. And once the coach has the player's respect, then everything is going to work so much easier. I know for me as a player, I ran into trouble sometimes because maybe I thought that I knew better than the coach. And I think that it's very important to establish that relationship right away and to make sure that we're all equals in all of this. And if we can do that and establish that equal respect for each other, then we can all help each other with all of these other different topics, and it makes everything so much easier. And when you feel like somebody cares about you, and then it allows them to be able to hold you accountable a little bit more. And, in terms of the social media stuff, if I feel like somebody cares about me, then it's going to be easier for me to talk to them about the tough decisions and the tough discussions.
I think on that point too, it's a great point, like trying to be in the boat together. I think when we start to see a lot of these issues arise, it's that hierarchy, it's that power, right? But to Brandon's point there, when as a coach, if we go in and say, okay, I'm just part of this group, I don't have all the answers either, we're going to work together through this. I've been enlightened all the time when I ask my players things, what do we need to do, or what do you see? It's amazing the material that they'll give us. So again, not rising above the group, but in fact, just being a member of the team. I agree wholeheartedly, Brandon, that can shape a group and help everyone move in the same direction with better sort of understanding of responsibility and everyone owning a piece of it. So it's not just on one person, it's on all of us moving this needle together.
I feel like it's a good time to be a hockey player. I think there's a lot of young, talented coaching going through the system. Like we talk, Finland is doing a great job, Sweden, other countries are following. It's a great time to be a hockey player. When I was playing, many times I walked into a team and I felt I was there for the coach. Like the coach and we were players were there for him. But now it's going the other way around. The coach is there for the players, and that's how it should be. You've taken the time to get a little bit of movement, a little bit of new inspiration into the coaching world, but I think we're definitely going in the right direction with that, and players can look forward to some very, very good years ahead if we all, help each other out a bit and, encourage each other to uphold the values and integrity and be the best version of ourselves.
So just one final sort of wrap-up thought. Thinking of the integrity topics that we've been watching today and discussing today, what is one sort of last thing you wish every coach knew or take away from this presentation and this panel?
I can start. I was just thinking of something. Is that the three of us are sitting here and telling you our stories. We're not going to have the same impact. If the kids from your team or players from your team watch our videos, it's not going to impact them as much as if you go out and tell them and carry on our stories back to your teams. It's just more powerful because they trust you. They look up to you. So when you go back home, make sure you share the stories and you carry on the integrity and values within your organizations. Because our message, the videos are well made, it's good. But it's every coach in every organization have to uphold the values. We are just here, to raise the issues and talk about it and be there for everyone.
I think for me, when you look at these topics, I think it's very natural to look at them and be like, well, it won't happen to me. It won't be us. And to your point, Brandon, when you open, it can happen to anyone. And so when you think about coaching and how cumbersome the career actually is and the facets that we're truly responsible for, these are real important pieces because, these are situations that can have massive domino effects. So, it's important that we all have great breakouts and power plays, there's no doubt about it, but recognizing that the portfolio is so much more extensive than that. And, dedicating that time that we need to ensure that, our athletes are in a good spot and they're not going down this path and we've got the right infrastructure around us. So knowing what our outlets are, I don't know who's in charge in Canada for this. I need to find out that name so I'm better informed. So I think just embracing that and not sloughing it under the carpet, just saying, it won't happen to me. I think we're learning through tough situations here that it truly can happen to anyone, and it's great people it's happening to. So not denying that.
Yeah, touching on that point, it's about continuing to grow the game. It's about continuing to think outside the box. And I've touched on this a little bit, and in hockey sometimes we have kind of been constricted a little bit, and we've been taught to think a certain way, and it's okay to not fit that mold all the time. You're allowed to be individual, you're allowed to have your own thoughts, you're allowed to have your own voice, and that's very important. Another thing is, don't be scared to fail. None of us learn anything if our lives are just a complete success all the time. In terms of winning as a player, you don't learn to win because you win all the time. You learn to win through losing. And all of the experiences that I've had, the times that I've become better as a person or as a player or as a teammate have been through going through adversity. And I think sometimes today we're a little scared to go through adversity, and for me, I would encourage it. Everybody needs to go through those tough times in order to come out of it a better person, better player, better teammate.
I want to thank you for sharing stories today, for being open, and for helping us tackle these tough topics. I'd like to thank all of you for listening today, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.